Hello. In this video, we are going to make it so that the player only gets destroyed after it's lost all of its health. So we are going to implement a health system for the player. Now, the way I'm going to do it here is I'm just going to use good old-fashioned JavaScript variables and all that kind of stuff. Um, and now just kind of know that Kaboom does actually already implement its own health system, which is really pretty interesting. There's methods like damage. Let's see if how I can show it to you in the documentation. So we could add a health component to the player, and then there's these methods like hurt and player on hurt and player on death and all this kind of stuff. Those are nice hooks that we could use, but I'm just gonna use variables. Um, but it has all kinds of cool things like this. So it's neat that Kaboom does that. But I'm just gonna do it the old-fashioned way. So it's kind of like score. How we just made a variable called score, and we're going to control that variable and pay attention to it. Because anytime you make a variable, it's probably good to think about three different steps. Almost all of the time, you're going to do these three things: create, read, and update. Yeah, maybe not always, but almost always. So with score, we created the score variable. We updated it, when we destroyed an alien, and then we read it to know if you won the game or not. So with health, it's kind of that same idea. We're going to create the variable. We will update it when um, you get hurt by one of the bombs, and then we're going to read it to know whether the player died, whether you lose. Um, so first, we're going to start with that create. So let HP equal 3. All right, so we're going to start with 3 HP points. So now we want to update it. I mean, we typically do that first. That part's more exciting, I guess. So why would the player's health be changed? Well, it's because the player collided with a bomb. So we go into this on collide that we already have in place, um, and we do something like this. So we take HP and reduce it. Now, depending on the system you're using, maybe you want to say something like minus equals 1 or minus equals 3, or whatever system you're using. The equivalent to minus equals 1 is just HP minus minus to decrement that variable. So it used to be 3, so now it's going to be 2. So that will at least cause that to update, and now we can jump into the read part. So why do we care about the HP? Well, that controls this idea of whether the player gets destroyed or not. And read almost always is an if statement. Right now we say when the player collides with a bomb, destroy the player. I mean, yeah, decrease the HP variable, but also just immediately destroy destroy the player. So an if statement lets us decide, should this happen or not. So if just always type 3 greater than 2, curly braces here, throw. So the destroy player should be inside of an if statement. Notice the curly braces on the if statement here. So now let's define, well, when should the player actually get destroyed? Well, it has something to do with HP, and it's if HP gets too low. If HP is less than or equal to 0, and notice the way this is facing, that HP is small. So if HP is less than or equal to 0, then that's when we'd want to destroy the player. So it won't happen just immediately. It will take a few hits. Logically, we could probably also say just equals, and I'd maybe like to do that just to show you. Remember, this is what equal looks like inside of an if statement. It's 2 equal signs. One equal sign all by itself sets a variable. We don't want to do that. We're asking a question, so it needs to be two equal signs here. But I think logically that's going to work. All right, so let's see if this works. Is our player only going to get destroyed if it gets hit 3 times? It might take a little while to make this happen. There's 2 and there's 3. All right, so we got that to work. So an even better thing to add is so we can see HP. That would be a nice feature here. All right, so then it's kind of like score in this regard. So just like we added a score label thing, let's do something that creates an HP label. So a const HP label equals add function adds a list of components, text, quotes, HP colon space plus HP, so you can actually see the value of the variable. Then a position of maybe like halfway on the screen. Maybe that's safe enough for the X value. So width parens divided by 2, the width of the game, but halfway across, comma, and then 20. I'm going to do whatever his score was at. Then I will also add a Z component to just make sure that it's on top of the aliens there. And I think in my very zoomed in version, that's going to look interesting. So let's see. But this should work pretty well. I'm just going to test to see what. Yeah, more or less, that's what I'm going for. Yep, so you can see that HP there. Now notice how even if I get hit by bombs, that number isn't going to increase because the text here isn't a promise for it to say HP and then the value. I have to tie into the moment of when that happens. When should this HP label be updated? Well, when it gets hit by a bomb. So you go back down. This is like score. So you go back down to where the player collides with the bomb, decrement the HP. Then this would be a good spot to do that. So we do have a variable called HP label. I mean, somehow we need to grab that object. So HP label dot. Then we can change the text component to equal quotes HP colon space ending the quotes. So that's the end of the letters we know that we want plus and then whatever HP happens to be. So that should actually make it update, and then this whole destroy player should still happen. All right, try to get it my game a little bit bigger. All right, so we saw that the HP decreased right there. All right, so when HP was 0, then the player disappeared. Now, what we're going to do off into the future is make it to where it actually goes to a you lose scene, but there's going to be another condition for that, so we'll see it. So my only last thought is that I do think we're being safe with the collision here. Sometimes you might want to think about destroying the bomb, kind of like how we destroyed the laser here. You might have to think about doing this. Now, this works out just because the collide function in Kaboom, it's only when you start to collide, so there's no logical issue. But sometimes you want to think about that. Like how when we did laser versus alien, we had to make sure to destroy the laser as well. But the logic of this ends up working out.